graduating, moving to a new place, and starting a new job. It's been so wild just getting to see all of this happen over the course of one whole year. It's a lot of adjustment. One of the main things that really stuck out to me is that I feel like I've actually made more of a conscious effort since high school to go see all the movies I've been really excited about. I feel like sometimes I let a lot of the movies that I want to see fall to the wayside because of just random life stuff or just not really taking the active initiative to go seek out the movies I want to. But this year, I feel like I actually got to go see the new Todd Haynes, the new Martin Scorsese, the new Godzilla. All these different films have come out and it's been a great year. But there's only been one film that's stuck with me so much to the point where I'm almost concerned, and that's... kind of going in just mind open. I had heard great things all across the board, but I was kind of wondering, how is Nolan gonna do his thing but also still tell this story that does ultimately require a human perspective, a human narrative. You can't really escape not putting us in the headspace of this guy in the vein of something like a Dunkirk or a Tenet. But then from minute one till the end, completely shocked. It's a movie that maintains momentum, keeps a strong human narrative, but somehow still has the ability to keep in line with a lot of Nolan's non-linear storytelling, and even flipping between black and white and color sequences feels like something straight out of Memento. Major actors are here playing minor roles, but everyone feels so committed. You see a phenomenal performance from Robert Downey Jr.
You set him on Oppenheimer. You convinced him.
Borden didn't take any.
Emily Blunt and Florence Pugh are killing the game. You are non-stop constantly being surprised by all these modern actors that all just kind of come together for this huge sweeping story. And speaking of huge, that IMAX does it so many favors, and that score feels just as equally haunting, inspirational, and sentimental. It really just hits every spectrum of what these type of movies should be. But why was it so shocking to me that Nolan had this in him? I mean, he's worked with ensemble casts, he's worked with large non-linear 3-hour narratives. Well, I feel like we kind of have to go back to what I originally thought of Nolan and how that kind of changed over time before I saw Oppenheimer. From the beginning, Nolan has always been a filmmaker that really drew me in. He was someone that always intrigued me about the behind the scenes of filmmaking. And because of that, I would go actively see movies like The Prestige, Inception, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight. You learn so much about how blockbuster filmmaking techniques can communicate something personal but also extremely complex. How a filmmaker can put aspects that they appreciate and what they connect to into their own movies. Like, for example, Nolan's love of nonlinear storytelling, his later obsession with using IMAX filmmaking. Someone who's grown up on a lot of older movies and kind of see that practical filmmaking has been kind of phased out by CGI, so it's good to see that a filmmaker still wants that sense of tangibility when they're making a movie, and that's something I really connected with. When you see a real truck flip or you see a set rotate around, you're constantly engrossed because it's really right there in front of you. As I continued moving forward, I kind of explored some new filmmakers I want to attach to. I was still in love with Nolan, but it encouraged me to keep discovering. I kind of felt myself distanced from Nolan the more films he was kind of making. How much the themes were kind of spoon-fed through dialogue, how sometimes characters were kind of underdeveloped, or how non-linear storytelling kind of conflicts with the emotions he's trying to go for, or sometimes doesn't even really need to happen in this particular story. With films like Interstellar and The Dark Knight Rises, those are movies that I still really enjoy, but they tend to kind of not really hold up on rewatches due to the fact that their emotions and the emotional logic that they're trying to go for kind of gets counteracted by other things like how busy the narrative can be. I feel as if with Dark Knight Rises, It's a movie that is so swept up in this gigantic epic storytelling narrative that it almost kind of loses sight of the thematic coherence. Like, what does Bane represent? He's the disgruntled 1%, but he's also the revenge of the League of Shadows, but he's also someone that fell in love and was being used. Like, it doesn't completely come together. He represents too many things, and then you even get to the ending of the movie and it almost feels like themes and ideas kind of left behind in favor of a gigantic ending where everyone's fighting, and it kind of loses some of that meaning. And then you go to a movie like Interstellar, and I definitely think I'm going to catch some flack here because Interstellar is a movie that has been getting quite the Re-Eval recently, and I think a lot of people love it. And it's a movie I think is really good. I do think it's far better than most blockbusters that come out, and I definitely sense that it's a very personal movie to Nolan. But at the same time, I feel as if he could totally cut it down or trimmed it down a little bit. It feels like it almost gets too caught up in playing theme word soup. You have scenes like Anne Hathaway's love monologue, or Dr. Mann just explaining his motivation as he's trying to break into the ship. At the beginning of the story, Cooper and his daughter are trying to investigate this paranormal activity happening in her bedroom. And it's really interesting because you're just watching these two characters connect and you're learning more about their relationship as it goes on. And it's very endearing. Like, it really draws you in, and it really feels like Nolan's pulling from his own life with his own daughter. Halfway through the movie, when he finally goes to space, not to say that there aren't emotional moments, because that 20 years of messages is still a fucking amazing scene and one of Nolan's best. The ending set piece at the Tesseract is aiming to go for something very comparable to 2001: A Space Odyssey, with that light tunnel and our main character kind of entering a world that operates out of time. However, while 2001 kind of lets the abstractness carry the emotion of the scene, Interstellar doesn't necessarily do that. And it feels kind of at a fault because the movie is trying to evoke a sense of catharsis. Love is the one thing that can bind space and time, and that is a really great idea. Cooper is doing this to ensure that his daughter will be safe along with the future of humanity. However, it's not explained as if it's a gigantic moment. It's explained more like it's a plot mechanic. The movie is too concerned with explaining how this Tesseract works to even really focus on the emotion of it. So it feels like this strange balancing act for most of it, when it really should be the emotional climax of the movie. So when we kind of move into this post-2016 Christopher Nolan, I find it really fascinating. The main reason is because Nolan is kind of sidestepping a lot of his usual criticisms. He's avoiding being so long-winded. He's avoiding kind of reminding the audience what the films are about. Kind of just lets the spectacle and all the technological advancements he's made throughout all his films kind of speak for themselves. When you watch a movie like Dunkirk, it's more capturing a visceral experience of survival through war and how these individuals were all trying to escape this one contained area towards safety. And the movie sets up its dramatic stakes really well. You don't get the most fleshed out characters, but the story doesn't really need it. And when you watch a movie like Tenet, it's pretty much the same exact kind of idea, but with something like a spy narrative. A no-name person working their way through a world that they didn't know existed, which is essentially being a spy. And Nolan's always wanted to make his spy movie. And it's a movie that I found myself really angry at, but it actually has a lot more in common with Dunkirk than you would realize. Again, it's another emotionally distanced narrative that's meant to capture a feeling that's more spectacle-based than emotional-based. And I think that's fine. That's what the movie set out to do. But I kind of always wondered, how was Oppenheimer going to turn out? Has Nolan completely pivoted into a new style of storytelling, and is that gonna work? When going into Oppenheimer, I was very interested to see if Nolan was going to prioritize a humanistic element on top of the spectacle, or he was going to kind of let the spectacle ride out and kind of give us insight into the characters through that. He had two different filmmaking styles kind of going on, which one he was going to choose for this specific biopic narrative. Well, it turns out the whole movie is kind of about how he's trying to understand the objective and the subjective, with the black and white sequences with Lewis Strauss being objective, and we're kind of getting to see his insight into what exactly happened after he met Oppenheimer. But then with the color sequences, you're getting the subjective view, Oppenheimer's recounting of his life, his own perspective on situations where he had to choose between his communist allegiances or the US government and making a name for himself in the world of physics. It takes those traditional ideological debates that Nolan loves about themes and concepts, but he decides to literalize them through the filmmaking. It's about someone fighting to reclaim their own narrative despite the fact that they were once so well known and upheld with such respect. And by seeing what other people think of this character on top of what this character thinks of himself, visualizing his understanding of quantum physics, you're getting such a well-rounded, good understanding of who this character is. Nolan decides to use a lot of his love for practical effects to visualize parts of the movie that would otherwise kind of be relegated to dialogue in a lesser movie. Oppenheimer's understanding of quantum physics is visualized primarily. You don't really get a complete monologue about how he sees the world and all of that, because it's just understood from the first opening minutes. And the music and the IMAX cinematography really do a lot to rein you in. So because of that, you're getting immersed, but you're also getting immersed in the favor of a character. Nolan's always flirted with the ideas of mankind's own destruction, or a main character kind of creating the problem that they enter into. So it's good to see that he actually wants to kind of get in depth and really analyze this concept that he's always kind of danced around from film to film. It feels almost personal to Nolan. And now that he's really gotten to do that, he takes it from an angle of someone that didn't even know that they were creating their own destruction until it was far too late, versus someone that feels like they're holding them accountable for it. And because of that constant conflict that's happening between both timelines, it's so fascinating. After looking through Nolan's entire filmography for this video, Oppenheimer really feels like the ultimate movie that Nolan is capable of creating. He's able to make a film that is so comprehensive about this man and who he is and all his ideologies, thoughts, beliefs, flaws, but at the same time never forgets to really put us in that sensory world and really utilizing the things that make Christopher Nolan Christopher Nolan. Moving forward, I'm curious to see what he's going to do next with his films. Is he going to move into the dramatic sphere and really try to see what more he can do in terms of storytelling in that arena? Or is he going to go back to his action filmmaking? Either way, I could not be more excited, and I'm just really curious to see how he's gonna continue evolving these themes and ideas that he's been so fixated on his entire career, while also kind of growing more as a filmmaker.